Some of you may have seen this Reddit post, some of you may not. This is obviously posted by a particular person. I'm not necessarily trying to direct any sort of argument against this person in particular. I bring up this post more because this is a sentiment that I've seen kind of circulating around the community, and for whatever reason, it kind of stuck with me. I do think it's actually kind of an important thing to discuss, and hopefully you'll see why as we go through this. I'm not going to read all of this because it's very long. But this person writes, I know that Twin One Pilots probably put DragPath behind a paywall for a reason, but they are millionaires. I think it's perfectly fine for people on here and on other platforms to ask where they can get the DragPath file because they weren't able to buy it for various reasons. I've seen so many privileged fans saying that Tyler and Josh wouldn't want us to get DragPath without paying for it, and they put it behind a paywall so that only their true fans, quote unquote, can listen to it, saying that is so mean and insane. I was in college and I'm broke. Can't afford it. Basically it goes on. And this person, and I've seen a lot of other people be very upset that they can't access the DragPath song without paying for it. And that's upsetting. I think overall this sentiment is a little strange. It might sound insensitive, and I get that. There's definitely a sense in which it's struck me with the whole DragPath conversation and some other things, just with stuff generally online that I've seen, that we're in a sort of position these days in which basically everything in terms of music, at least, we can talk about other things more broadly, but at least with music, basically everything can be accessed for free. And I think it's easy to forget that, one, the people, and we can get into Tyler and Josh's own specific situation in a moment, but the people creating the music, the artists, don't actually make a lot of money a lot of the time from the music that people are listening to because so much of it is available for free. Obviously, back in the day, if you wanted to listen to a song, you either had to buy the entire album that the song was on, or maybe if you were lucky, it would have been released as a single and you could just buy the single as like a record, right? A vinyl. And so nowadays, basically everything that we listen to, we can listen to for free. Now, Spotify isn't free. I mean, you can get free versions, but it has limitations and so on. And you can also get into a conversation. I acknowledge I'm touching on a bunch of different tangents here that we're not really getting into, but you can also get into a conversation about the fact that when you watch a video on YouTube, it isn't really free because it has ads. And so you're the product and you're paying for it with your time by watching ads. Okay, fine, right? That's another conversation. But at the end of the day, you're not having to spend any money to listen to music that you want to listen to. If you don't pay for Spotify, you can just find it on YouTube. We're spoiled in our current situation, and because of that, as soon as you might have to pay for something to listen to it or to consume it in any way, it's upsetting to people. And to the point that people might even be mad, and I'm not saying this particular poster said this, but I've seen other people saying this, that it's wrong, it's morally wrong of 21 Pilots to paywall DragPath, and I don't think that really makes sense. And the other side of this, right, with people not wanting to pay for the music they're consuming, and in fact being mad that they might have to pay for the music that they're consuming, does affect small artists a lot. Now, again, I understand Tyler and Josh are probably in a very different situation, right? They're top artists. They're, internationally known. They've got international world tours. They seem to be doing pretty well financially. But there is also the aspect that there are people they employ. And so even if Tyler and Josh can take a financial hit, it isn't necessarily true that the people they employ can. And we saw this, and to the band's credit, we saw this during the pandemic, during the COVID era, when their crew was basically unemployed, and so the band raised money for Live Nation, I believe, or in partnership with Live Nation, to kind of help out with people who are suddenly unemployed because of not touring, right? So they're very aware of making sure that the people that they employ aren't left high and dry, because while at the same time Tyler and Josh themselves, could take a financial hit. The thing people forget is that DragPath was not the only thing you paid for, it was also a whole digital album plus digital remains. Yes, that's very true. To play devil's advocate here for a minute, I think the difference is people, like, they did a similar thing where they paywalled the Clancy digital remains, but it didn't contain any previously unheard songs, and so people felt like they weren't missing out on as much by not accessing that, right? The the digital remains felt like a bonus thing that contained all this cool artwork that you could like purchase digital artwork essentially, but there wasn't a song attached to it. And I think, I mean, it's definitely new. I don't know if 21 Pilots have ever otherwise released a piece of music that's only available as a digital download. And so it's a new thing for people to wrestle with, I guess, encounter. And so I get it, right? I understand, and I'll acknowledge I'm saying this as someone who could afford to buy the digital download, right? And I understand some people might not be able to justify that expenditure. That's valid. Maybe they're more financially responsible than I am. Fair enough. But again, I think what we forget these days is that there used to be a time in which to listen to any music at all, you had to buy a physical vinyl. And so everything was paywalled, right? You couldn't just go listen to something for free. And I think there's a sense in which it's not entirely fair to say you should just be able to listen to something that someone else has created. You should just be able to listen to that for free. And if they attempt to paywall that, they are doing something wrong. But with that said, there were some things I did want to touch upon in this. So I'm just going to read through it again and pause at those moments. So I know that 21 Pilots probably put DragPath behind a paywall for a reason, but they are millionaires. I think it's perfectly fine for people on here and other platforms to ask where they can get DragPath because they weren't able to buy it for various reasons. This, I don't necessarily agree with that exactly, but I do think it's fair for people to be a little confused or wonder why this is different. I've seen many privileged fans saying that Tyler wouldn't want us to get DragPath without paying for it. That's a weird way of putting it. I don't know that they're sitting there saying, we want you to have to pay so much as we need you to have to pay, or we want to make this an exclusive item. This phrase conjures up an image of them kind of conspiring to bleed their fans dry. I don't think that's really what's going on. But then again, so only their true fans can listen to it. Saying that is so mean and insane. I agree, and I think 21 Pilots would agree with this. I think that it is unfair to say only the people who can afford to purchase DragPath are true fans. Just like if you've never heard Regional at Best, a certain section of their music, a body of their music, you're not a true fan. I don't think that's necessarily fair. I mean, again, what does that mean? I don't think it's something that we can really pinpoint or nail down. So I agree with this sentiment here. That's a little silly to say that, right? Only true fans can afford to buy DragPath. And there is also a sense here where it's not just about, and this is where I'll give the side of it where I'm, I guess, frustrated, or I side more with this sentiment and more, I guess, against 21 Pilots, which is that I was lucky, and everyone else who purchased the digital remains were lucky, that they were able to access the computer. They were paying attention to what was going on with 21 Pilots when digital remains dropped, because it was only available for a limited amount of time. And if you were, I don't know, sick and sleeping for a week because you had a bad fever or traveling somewhere, you would just miss it. Now, it's not because you couldn't buy it or you didn't want to, you just weren't there at the right time. Again, it's their music, it's what they created, they can do whatever they want with it, and I think it'll be hard for me to be convinced that they're doing something immoral or wrong, or that they really need to be criticized for or held accountable for choosing to release a piece of their music that they created in the way that they wanted to. But as a fan, I will say, I wish after doing the digital remains release, they had then come out with a vinyl. If for no other reason that I like having all my music on physical media. I don't like that I only have a downloaded computer file of the song. And again, it's something I would be willing to pay for. I'd be willing to pay for more money for it than I did for the digital remains download, right? $15, $20 for that single. That's fine. Again, profit margins might be different, obviously, because they're pressing a vinyl regardless. I do think it would be better if they were to release it on physical media, or if they had released another version of Breach, the full album that contained it, or it was on some CDs or whatever. So I do agree with that sentiment, right? I think it would be cool to see them release it. I don't care if they never put it on streaming services. They don't have any obligation to. Like, I'm perfectly fine with it being something that's a bit more exclusive, a bit more hidden, a bit more fan base exclusive. But I do wish it wasn't a limited time edition, because it does give rise to people, and I'm not condoning this, but it does give rise, just as a fact, it gives rise to people sharing bootleg copies of the song around with people who otherwise would spend the money to purchase it. And now the band is missing out on that money. Again, releasing it as part of the digital remains makes a lot of sense in the story. I don't think there was a problem with doing that. I think it made a lot of sense to do that. I think it was cool that they did that. But it would be cool if they, somewhere down the road, were to release on physical media as another exclusive edition. I don't think you should call yourself a true fan because you were there at the right time, in the right place, with the right amount of money in your bank account to purchase the digital remains, but I also think it's fine for them to have released it the way they did. That, I think, was everything I wanted to say on that. Those are my 2 cents, and now I am genuinely curious to hear from all of you. Do you disagree? And if you do, let me know, especially if you strongly disagree. Lay out your arguments for why I'm wrong, why they should have released on streaming at this point, why it's wrong and unfair that they haven't, because this definitely is a sentiment that I've seen among the fan base, and I completely understand why. I just think it's indicative of a place that we've achieved in our society where everything is just available at our fingertips as soon as we want it for next to nothing or nothing. And as soon as any part of that changes and is a bit inconvenient or a bit costly to consume art, people get very upset. And I don't think that's quite right. And I think it's actually a little concerning, because when new artists are trying to make it on the music scene, it's very hard for them to do that financially, to be able to do it in the way that they want to do it and still achieve success financially, because one stream makes them a lot less money than one purchase of an album or one purchase of a single on physical media or a digital download. You being able to consume it for free, even if it's not wholly for free because there are still ads, does still cost the artist a lot of money. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be able to access these things for free if the artists choose to put it there. I just don't think there's a moral imperative on the artists to do that. That being said, what do you guys think?